The young and the restless Spoilers Martin slumped against the cold concrete wall of his cell, arms folded tight, eyes burning with equal parts fury and exhaustion. Every clank of distant metal bars, every muffled shout from a guard on patrol, felt like a personal insult. He'd been here, imprisoned, for months now, and the toll on his mind and body was impossible to ignore. The fluorescence overhead flickered intermittently, casting his gaunt face in strobe-like relief. He'd tried every angle, appeals, threats, the occasional bribe slipped through corrupt channels. Nothing worked. The walls were ironclad, both literal and figurative. Still, Martin wasn't the sort to give up. In fact, being pushed to the brink was exactly what he needed to uncover an escape route. Over the past week, he had meticulously noted guard rotations, observed which officers were zealous and which were prone to boredom, and catalogued every potential blind spot in the infirmary wing. More than once, he'd feigned a coughing fit so convincing that a nurse pressed a stethoscope to his chest without a second thought. But until now, these had been dry runs, tests of how easily he could summon sympathy, how quickly the guards would respond. His plan, simple in concept but devilishly effective, hinged on one ironclad truth: no prison guard or administrator dared let an inmate die on their watch. The second his condition crossed the threshold into life-threatening, protocol forced the prison to transport him to the city hospital. There, security was looser, external, and most importantly, he'd be out of reach of the impenetrable walls that surrounded him now. The feigned collapse that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows swallowed the cell block, Martin began the performance of a lifetime. He swallowed his evening ration of tablets. But instead of medication, his water contained a carefully calibrated dose of an emetic compound that would induce violent nausea. As soon as the first rumblings of disgust hit his stomach, he doubled over, clutching his abdomen. "Prisoner Martin, control yourself," barked Guard O'Leary, a broad-shouldered man whose loyalty to regulations was as rigid as the bars he patrolled. Martin gasped and heaved. His eyes rolled back. He began to choke on imaginary bile. The guard's radio crackled to life: "Medical emergency, cell block C." In under 2 minutes, 2 more guards rushed in, followed by a nurse carrying a medical kit. Martin's act peaked. He thrashed against his restraints, heart monitor chirping on the ground beside him, letting out a strangled cry for help. "Nurse," the guard ordered. "He's coded orange. Get him stabilized." With a curt nod, the nurse checked his vitals, murmured concern, and within moments had summoned an ambulance. The guard cuffed Martin's wrists to the gurney rail, a nod to procedure, while the nurse injected sedative to keep him calm. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Martin locked eyes with O'Leary. "Good luck, officer," he croaked. "You'll wish you stayed home." Hospital protocol and a moment of solitude. The emergency room at St. Mercy's Hospital was a blur of motion and noise, red lights spinning, monitors beeping, doctors talking urgently. By policy, a single prison guard remained with every transferred inmate, unable to leave and tasked only with ensuring no one helped the prisoner escape. Martin had counted on this: one guard, outnumbered, isolated, and untrained in dealing with the kind of man standing before him. His wrists remained cuffed, clamped to the hospital bedside rails. The guard, Officer Ramirez, was a lean man with anxious eyes. He set his backpack, containing a sidearm and radio, beside the bed and nodded curtly before taking a folding chair. Martin lay flat, breathing shallow. The sedative was only beginning to dull his senses. He feigned grogginess, and as Ramirez drifted into a half-sleep, staring at his smartphone under the deceptive glow of the hospital's blue-coated light, Martin took his chance. First, he had to dismantle the in-bed cuff. Over the previous nights, he'd hidden a tiny metal splinter, sharper than steel but as thin as a hair, in a cavity behind a loose flake of paint in his cell. He now palmed that piece of metal and worked it into the cuff's release mechanism. The hospital's standard-issue cuffs clicked open almost imperceptibly. Next, he needed to access Ramirez's backpack without waking him. Martin assumed a position of vulnerability, head turned away, shoulders slumped, and waited. Soon enough, Ramirez's head lolled forward, and he snored low. Martin stretched out his foot, nudged the backpack off the floor. It fell with a soft thud. Ramirez stirred, but before he could wake fully, Martin yanked the zipper and retrieved a lightweight piece of surgical tubing, a spare key, smuggled in with his contraband, and, most crucially, a hospital ID badge that a friendly orderly had misplaced earlier. Sneaking out of the room, Martin retrieved his clothes, folded neatly on a chair, and swapped them for the bland green scrubs he'd liberated. He smiled to himself as he adjusted the ID badge around his neck. The hospital was busy, corridors teemed with nurses, doctors, technicians. He strode confidently, mask pulled down beneath his chin, headset in place, simulating the tired gait of an overworked intern. Into the labyrinth of the hospital, Martin's mental map of St. Mercy's was near perfect. He'd studied floor plans during his time in prison, bribed one of the hospital's night shift custodians for insider tips, and even hacked a maintenance terminal to verify security camera blind spots. He avoided the main elevators. Too many cameras, and instead took the service lift one floor down. He exited into a dimly lit corridor used by supply trucks and maintenance staff. A simple swipe of the stolen ID let him past the locked door. The back stairwell descended 3 flights to the basement loading dock. Martin emerged into an alcove where garbage bins clanked, and the odor of antiseptic mixed with refuse. A rusty side door, marked emergency power only, stood ajar, the brace unlatched by the same orderly who'd pocketed the badge. He slipped out into an alleyway that led to a quiet street behind the hospital. Freedom, raw and sweet, battered him like a wave. But there was no time to savor it. He ducked into the shadows, ripped off the scrubs, and changed into a dark hoodie and jeans he'd stashed in a delivery van parked nearby. Within minutes, he vanished into the night traffic of Genoa City. The threat to Tracy out on the streets, Martin's mind spun back to Tracy. She'd been his ally at first. His confidant in the early days behind bars, the one person who'd risked everything to slip him notes and help him find hope. Over time, though, their ambitions diverged. Tracy wanted out, a fresh start in another city, away from the scheming and duplicity of Genoa. She believed leaving would spare her the heartache of watching friends betray friends, watching violence erode her spirit. She deserved peace. But Martin knew better. Outside of Genoa, Tracy would be vulnerable, alone, without his protection, exposed to embezzlers, old enemies, and the insidious reach of anyone determined to hunt her down. Worse, if word of his escape got out, and if she were gone, he'd have no leverage and no sanctuary. He couldn't bear the thought of her drifting into danger. So he needed to intercept her before she vanished. The plan: track her to a safe house, confront her with undeniable proof that staying in Genoa, under his watch, was her best path to survival. But more than that, he wanted to spare her guilt. He'd weave a story that spared her from recriminations, letting her believe she'd been in control all along, even as he subtly manipulated events. Gathering intelligence, Martin's first call was to an old contact, Darius the Fixer Malone, a smooth operator with long fingers in every underworld pie in town. Dressed in jeans and a leather jacket, Martin stepped into the Gilded Cage, a jazz lounge on the outskirts of downtown, where the red velvet curtains muffled conversation. Malone's eyes glinted with recognition as Martin slid into a booth. "You look like hell," Malone whispered, voice gravelly. "Free again," Martin said, voice low. Malone chuckled. "And still play the martyr card, I see." Martin slid a small wad of cash across the table. "Tracy. She's planning to leave. I need her trail." He didn't mention his escape, he played it cool. "She's headed for the Riverside safe house. 4 days from now." Malone pocketed the money. "You sure?" he asked. "If she gets wind of this move, she'll vanish completely." "I'm sure," Martin said. Manipulating the pieces armed with Tracy's itinerary, Martin orchestrated subtle delays to her plans. He bribed the cab company to lose her reservation slip. He hacked the ticketing system for her private flight from Genoa International, forcing a one-day postponement. He even arranged for a courier, posing as a real estate agent, to deliver an urgent update on her lease, requiring her signature to avoid eviction. Each ploy was innocent on its face, just enough to keep her in town a few days longer. In the meantime, Martin arranged a chance encounter at the Gilded Cage, where the noise and dim lighting created plausible deniability. A confrontation in the jazz lounge on the appointed evening, Martin spotted Tracy slipping through the red velvet door, her expression wary. She looked radiant, hair curling around her shoulders like a halo, yet her eyes held suspicion. "Martin?" she said, voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" He gestured to the booth. "Sit." She hesitated, then settled opposite him. The band played a languorous saxophone solo in the background. Martin folded his hands. "I'm sorry I lied," he began. "About the lease, the flight. But I did it for you." She laughed, a brittle sound. "For me? You locked me out of my own plans, Martin. I thought you wanted me free." "I do," he said softly. "But not alone." She looked hurt. "Do you even trust me to make my own choices?" He reached across the table and took her hand. "I trust you more than anyone. That's why I can't let you go halfway across the country, where they don't know you, where no one will watch your back." Tears glistened in her eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I thought leaving was the only way to breathe." He squeezed her hand. "Then breathe here, with me. I promise, no more secrets. We'll find a way." An uneasy pace they left the lounge together, stepping into the cool night air. Martin hailed a cab, no fancy vehicles, just a simple ride back to his modest apartment on the outskirts of Genoa City. Over the next few days, as Tracy unpacked her bags in a small guest room, they talked for hours, about redemption, about forgiveness, about starting fresh without sacrificing trust. Martin knew this peace was fragile. He'd made enemies, both among the prison authorities who would hunt for him and in the criminal underworld who'd seen his escape as a challenge. But as he watched Tracy laugh at something he said, the way her shoulders relaxed for the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe they might just weather the storm together. The city around them remained a battleground of power plays and shifting loyalties. But inside those four walls, Martin and Tracy carved out a sanctuary, born of desperate ambition but sustained by genuine care. And as dawn broke over Genoa's skyline, Martin finally let himself hope that freedom, both theirs, might mean more than mere escape. It might mean the chance to become something better. It wasn't by sheer luck that Martin slipped through the cracks of St. Mercy's Hospital and vanished into the night. He had help, though who that ally is remains shrouded in mystery. Perhaps it was someone on the inside of Genoa's justice system, a disillusioned guard who'd grown tired of the same old power plays and saw in Martin a kindred spirit, or maybe a sympathetic doctor, quietly appalled by the overcrowded ward and willing to bend the rules for a patient with a pressing case of medical necessity. It could even be a brand new face in Genoa's underworld, someone Martin bribed, or blackmailed, into playing a small but crucial role, leaving the back gate unlocked just long enough, disabling a camera, slipping him the hospital ID badge. Whoever it is, they've vanished once their brief part was done, and Martin remains the only one who truly knows their identity. That secrecy buys him safety. If the prison wises up and cracks down on guards or staff, he still has free rein. It also buys him leverage. Whoever helped him will need something in return, and Martin is a master at collecting debts. Meanwhile, Tracy is still very much in Genoa, far from the peaceful escape she once dreamed of. Word spreads quickly that a high-profile inmate has disappeared from police custody, checkpoints are tightened, and every exit point is under surveillance. Tracy's safe house options dwindle by the hour, and the men who would negotiate her favor for a glimpse of Martin's whereabouts are closing in. Her only hope lies in reconnecting with Martin, but can she trust the man who just manipulated her into staying? As for Martin himself, his mind is already spinning beyond the escape. He's tasted freedom, but the hunger for control remains. Will he turn his cunning toward protecting those he cares for, or will he use it to undermine every obstacle in his path, even if it means drawing blood? His next move could be to recruit a more permanent lieutenant in Genoa, someone who can watch Tracy's back and keep the police distracted, yet every new ally risks betrayal. Or he might decide to strike preemptively at any rival who senses weakness, orchestrating a series of accidents to ensure his dominion remains unchallenged. One thing is certain, Martin's game is only just beginning, and in the labyrinth of Genoa's power struggles, no one is entirely safe, not Tracy, not the guard who helped him, and certainly not the next adversary foolish enough to stand in his path. The question isn't only who his ally is, but whether Martin's ambition will turn him into the very monster he once escaped from. The next chapters promise betrayals, shifting loyalties, and the dark realization that true freedom may cost more than anyone is willing to pay.